What's going on, everybody? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and the all-around tech guru. What's going on, Greg?
Oh, not much. How are you doing, Vinny?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well. Excited for the episode today.
Yeah, it should be cool.
Yeah, man. It's, we got contacted by Al's PR agency. He's promoting his latest, work, which is The Racers, and we'll get into that. But he's a really famous photographer and journalist. Started his career at a small daily newspaper in Florida while he was in high school, actually. While he was in college, started, building his reputation. And now he's just, he's done some really amazing work putting together stuff from his archives that we're going to talk about. I mean, he's photographed, famous race car drivers, Mario Andretti, Steve McQueen, Dan Gurney, Carroll Shelby. He's also done, popular culture figures like Muhammad Ali, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the king of gonzo journalism, Hunter Thompson. So without further ado.
Well, hold on real quick. There's something I think we gotta explain.
Okay, what's that?
When we say he's photographed, I mean, it's not like, oh, I took a picture of Mario Andretti from the stands, No. It's much more, for lack of a better word, intimate than that. Like,
yeah, he's, photojournalism back then was a lot different than it is today. He wasn't so much like a paparazzi. He was, in the thick of it. This guy's had multiple Time magazine covers, multiple Newsweek covers. When you talk about photojournalism, he's up there with the greats.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I honestly don't know if nowadays saying someone's got a Time cover is that big of a deal, or as big of a deal as it was. But that's like saying somebody has an Oscar. I mean, seriously, that's a pretty big accomplishment.
It's huge, man. And I would argue that it's still a huge accomplishment. I mean, is it the institution that it once was? I don't know. That's not for me to decide, but I think it's still, it's a huge accomplishment for any journalist or photographer, to have the cover of Time or Newsweek, and we're not even mentioning some of the other titles that he's worked for, Sports Illustrated. The list goes on and on. The guy, he has a resume that spans decades, working in advertising, journalism, and just photography as an art form. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Al Satterwite, Greg.
All right.
Al Satterwite, everyone. Can't thank you for being here enough, man. Thank you so much. I know you're in the middle of a move, which is always very stressful. So we really appreciate you making time to do this. I'm a big fan of your work, and especially your latest work, The Racers. Although it had been previously released, it's now available for the masses, and we'll get into that. But Al, I want to start this pseudo interview at the beginning, man. You're this crazy, experienced and talented photographer, journalist. How'd you get started? I know that right now you're moving from Los Angeles back to New York, but your career started in Florida. How'd that whole trip start, and where have you gone?
Well, the short version is basically I grew up in Florida. So I got lucky and I got a job as an intern at the local newspaper, which is a fairly large paper, the St. Petersburg Times. And they had 13 staff photographers, and I was like the high school edition version. But I really loved it. So I would follow around and tag along after all the other photographers, carry anything they wanted. And when the timing was right, ask a few questions. And it was a total learning experience. And I really, really liked it. And so when I went to college, I was already involved in photography. So I immediately started working for the college newspaper and a college yearbook. And I got associated with UPI, United Press International Wire Service. And including St. Pete Times, who I continued to freelance for. So basically, I was always shooting. So I spent 5 years in 5 different colleges, moving around the country, basically taking pictures and occasionally attending classes, until I realized after 5 years that I really didn't need to have a degree. I ended up with like an associate arts degree after 5 years of work.
Were you
But
already getting steady work as like a freelance photographer, and then also working at the St. Petersburg Times?
yeah, by the time I got to the University of Missouri, which was the mecca for photojournalism, I already had an agent in New York, and I had more photo credits than all the students combined. And then I had a great time because Professor Edom, who was the great learning force out there, sort of took me under his wing. And although I wasn't in upper division and couldn't really participate in any photojournalism classes, he invited me out to his Thursday night editing sessions at his house. So I got to mix in with that. And then I questioned the other students a lot who were in upper division. It's like, like, what are they teaching you? What are you learning? What's going on? And it turned out that they were like 10 years behind the times.
What time frame was this when you were in college?
This is in 1964, 65.
Okay.
Oh, at UPI, we were like processing film and special developers, and because you had to get it out and on the wire really quick, and we were all using 35 millimeter cameras, Nikons, which we had for several years. Nikon F came out in, I think, like 1962 or maybe 1960, but they were using 2.25, and it was kind of like, it didn't really interest me. So I that's when I really sort of moved on. And as soon as I got out of college, I went full time with a newspaper. But I didn't really want to be on the paper. I mean, I wanted to be a magazine photographer. I wanted to work for Life magazine and National Geographic like everybody else. So this job came up, potential job came up as the governor of Florida's personal photographer. And my mentor at the time said, you should take it. So I did. And basically, it started out as basically me taking pictures of the governor, shaking hands with people. They would make 8x10s. He would sign them, and they send them back to him. It's like a big PR thing. But I did that. But in the same time, I was shooting photojournalistic style, him and his kids and his wife and people around him, and basically doing it my way and liking it. We traveled constantly. We had a Learjet, and I spent more time in it than I did in my apartment in the Capitol in Tallahassee. But that lasted 13 months, and I went, I can't take this anymore. I don't like politics. I'm done. I want to get on with my magazine career. So I quit, and I went to New York. I got an agent, Camera 5, run by Ken Regan, which had, I think at the time, we had about 5 other photographers scattered around the country, and it was great. So I went back to Florida. They started feeding me assignments because everybody comes to Florida for some reason or other. So I shot a lot of stuff, and I traveled a lot. I mean, in those days, magazines would travel you anywhere and everywhere. So I was constantly on airplanes. I mean, sometimes I'd be in 2 cities in one day doing 2 different assignments for 2 different magazines. And some of the magazines were European, and most of them were Time and Newsweek and Sports Illustrated, et cetera, et cetera. I got a call one afternoon saying, can you be in LA tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock? And I went, yeah, sure. So I fly to LA on the red eye, try to stay awake in the lobby of the Roosevelt Hotel until I get picked up by Bob Hope's people. And I'm on the last Christmas tour for 2 weeks.
Oh man, that's awesome.
In Europe. But the best part, or maybe not the best part, was the airlines had misplaced my luggage, so it didn't arrive when I got to LA. So my luggage kept chasing me, and we went to Anchorage, which was in the middle of a snowstorm, and then from Anchorage we went to Tokyo. So I get to Tokyo, and I don't have any luggage, and I'm wearing sort of the child, and I'm wearing black leather pants and a shirt and a leather jacket, and that's that's all I got. And we show up, and the airlines kept calling me, and I finally said, don't send it to this, send it to the next stop where I'm at. So the next stop, like 3 or 4 or 5 stops down the road, was Bangkok, Thailand. And I pull into Bangkok wearing black leather pants, and it's like
Oh God.
100 degrees.
Did you at least have your camera equipment with you?
Oh yeah, I always had my camera. I never ship cameras. I always have them on me.
Yeah.
Luckily, my luggage showed up, so I got to change clothes, and people were going, "Oh, we thought that was you were just being cool." I'm like, no, I'm so that was it. I mean, I spent until about, well, at some point in there, like 1974, I decided I had done an assignment in California for 30 days shooting on this Mazda special show. And I loved California. The people were so nice and there were so many things going on. I went home to West Palm Beach and I told my wife, pack, we're moving. And so like within 6 months in 1974, we moved from Florida to Los Angeles. And it was great. It wasn't really a still city yet. There were no rental houses for still equipment. There were no supply places, nothing like that. There were a few ad agencies. And along about that time, and this is like I got there in 74 and up until about 1980, I started moving into advertising because one, I wanted to make some money. I mean, editorial was great and it was exciting and you were on the front lines and it was cutting edge, but you were barely scraping by with what they paid you on a daily rate and cover rates and space rates. I mean, they paid all your expenses, but I woke up one morning in a motel room and I didn't know where the hell I was. I had to look on the telephone to find out because they usually had the city listed. It's like, oh, and I decided at that point it's time to sort of move along. So I got a rep, an agent, and I started trying to get into advertising and do a little job here, a little job there. And it turned out all the work's coming out of New York. So I had an agent in New York and she said, you got to move to New York if you want to be successful. So like December 1980, I moved everything to New York City. And
Wow.
it took 2 or 3 years to get established. And then by the mid 80s, I was shooting campaigns. We were doing car campaigns. We were doing cigarette campaigns, which paid a boatload of money. I mean, my day rate then was like $10,000-$12,000 a day.
Whoa.
To shoot cigarettes because they bought all rights because they basically used them everywhere. And
what campaigns were you a part of, specifically cigarette stuff? Like, did you have anything to do with the Marlboro Man?
well, yeah, actually, I did. We were up for it and all nearly got it at one point, but it was like $750,000 to $1 million campaign. And when you have that kind of money floating around, things get a little weird with, a little behind the scenes stuff going on. So we never got the Marlboro campaign, but we did Salem cigarettes, we did Kent International, we do a lot of stuff. And because the way they're structured, like we were down in Jamaica for 2 weeks shooting Salem, and they would fly in, we would fly in the models that we'd precast, and we would shoot men and women, and then we'd fly in just men, and then just women, and then different ethnic type people because it had different markets that they marketed. Right. I mean, they had a big book and they were like, okay, this is what we're doing today. This is what we're doing tomorrow. So we had to constantly, change things around.
That's wild. It just speaks to how different advertising was back then.
Well, yeah, and it was fun and it was interesting because it was a challenge in how to solve problems because our director would give me a little piece of paper that I had to sort of make into a piece of film. And I enjoyed that until about, the end of like the 80s, like 1990. And they had economical problems. And I think there was, I don't know what you want to call it, but a big recession or a crash or things got weird back then. And a lot of art directors lost their jobs. And at that point I went, this is never coming back. This is kind of a change. You're not going to hire these people back. I'm kind of really unhappy with advertising. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm going to end up being a bitter, sad drunk. It's not creative. I mean, I had little creative projects I did on my own. But along about 1992, I sort of said, game over. So I had left New York. I kept a small apartment there for several years, and I had bought a 45-acre farm down in Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Back and forth. I mean, land was cheap then, that far away. So, and it was an 8-hour drive by car. So we would stay down there for maybe a month or two at a time. In those days, we used fax machines. So they would fax us the layout and we could deal with that. And when we had got a job, we'd just come back to New York. But I started flying from Virginia back to LA. And I decided, by that time I'm in my 50s and it's like, I really hate starting over. But, and every time you start over, you have to start at the bottom. Because when I left newspapers, I got into magazines and I'm like the low guy on the totem pole. It took me like 10 years to build up a reputation. And then I moved into advertising and I'm nobody again. And it took me like 10 years to build up a reputation. So I started fishing for motion picture. I wanted to be a director of photography because I really liked that. I didn't want to be a director. So I shot a lot of student films. I shot a lot of shorts. I've done probably 3 or 4 features. They're like really low budget. You might see them on late night TV, like 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's when the best programs are on television.
Well, I love movie making because I had a crew, and it took me several years to develop it, but I had really good Steadicam operator and good assistant, camera assistants, first, seconds, and loaders, and my gaffers and electricians, and I kind of knew everybody, and they would work for me on a low budget film and they didn't make hardly any money because they knew I wasn't going to screw them over. And then when I got a commercial or a music video or something where they would get decent pay, they knew I would hire them. So I would hire them back for that. It was kind of a trade-off back and forth. So we'd make money on some projects and others we'd do because it was interesting. And I read a lot of scripts. Most of them are pretty bad, and if I didn't believe in the script, I wouldn't even bother to, want to shoot it. But it was fun. But after doing that for about 8 years, I realized I was never going to make a living in film because you really have to be higher up in the echelon to get any kind of money. And I just wasn't ever going to be near that. And I was too old for it. So, I mean, I still do some shooting. There's one director I work with a fair amount. And we're waiting on a project to fund now, but who knows if we'll ever get the money. So in the meantime, I sort of got into looking at my archive, which I had in big boxes and hadn't really looked at. And I've never counted them, but I must have, I don't know how many 100,000 black and white negatives from the newspaper. Well, most of the stuff I shot for the Times I didn't own, except when I was on my own time. But all the magazine work, I literally own everything because that was the deal that we always made. We own all the rights. So I started looking at that, and I had all my color because I always shot 95% of what I shot was on Kodachrome 25, which it's a really good film because it's dye injected instead of processed. So it lasts a long time if you take care of it. I mean, the color I have now is pretty much as vibrant as it was the day I shot it and got it back from the lab. So I started looking through all my stuff and trying to come up with some ideas. And I think one of the first ideas I had was I had like 50 some rolls of film I'd shot on Muhammad Ali in 70 and 71.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, man. If you guys are interested in checking any of this out, go on over to, it's alsatterwite.com, right, Al?
Yeah.
alsatterwite.com. And you can check out all of his work and his portfolio and the books that he's mentioning. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about that specifically. It seems like throughout your career, if you're looking at these photos and these books that you put together, you were around some of the most iconic personalities in popular culture during that time. What was that like? How'd you get so many photos of Muhammad Ali? And yeah, tell us about it.
Well, I lived in West Palm Beach, and the Fifth Street gym where he trained was down in Miami Beach, which was like an hour and 15 minutes drive. So Time Magazine and a number of different publications through Camera 5 would assign me to shoot Ali. And in 70, he had just won his Supreme Court case. So he had 2 fights coming up that he was practicing. I've never shot a boxing match, and I don't know anything about boxing. I only know people. So, you know, I got assigned to go down there. So I met his trainer and Ali. And when I work like that, and especially in photojournalism, I'm basically a fly on the wall. I kind of hang around, always watching, always ready for something interesting. And so I'm happy if they don't know I'm there. But Ali was such a nice guy. I mean, he knew I was there, but he didn't pay any attention to me except occasionally. And he was so big. I mean, I don't know, I forget his exact dimensions, but he had to be over 6 feet, and I don't know, weighed 220 or something, but he was big. But he was like a pussycat. He was so nice and so gentle to be around. And I shot Arnold Schwarzenegger also, who he wasn't as tall, but he was also very big and very intimidating. But another pussycat, just so easy to work with and so gentle.
Did you shoot Arnold before he became the action movie star?
Yeah. Yeah, he had won like 6 or 7 Mr. World Universe or whatever those titles.
Okay, so it was in between the time that he made the jump from bodybuilding to movie stardom. That's awesome.
Correct, yeah. I mean, he was very big in his field, but I don't think a lot of people knew him outside of that then. And, you know, I would shoot him at the original Gold's Gym, which no longer exists. And then we would go down to El Coyote and have lunch, not always, but sometimes, and then sit there and talk for like, you know, an hour or something. I mean, he was just a sort of an ordinary guy, you know, and I was like, well, where do you get your clothes? And he said, I bought them custom made, because, you know, his thighs were like bigger than my legs. And, you know, we went shopping one day for plants. And one day we drove up in the mountains to a skeet shooting place. And he went up there with a friend of his, Mr. America. And I don't know how good they were because I was focused on them, but they were having so much fun. It was unbelievable, just having fun. But getting back to Ali, you know, Ali was always in the ring, and then he would usually walk several blocks to lunch. I would usually walk with him. And all the local people, they knew him and they were like, hey, you know, and they wave at him and stop, and he would talk to them, and a couple of kids would ask him questions, and he'd sit down on a step and talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, he was just that kind of a guy. And then we'd go riding in his limo somewhere. And one day we were riding around and he says, pull over. And he pulls over, the car pulls over, and he says, would you go up there and ask how much they want for that house? He saw a for sale sign. And you know, I've got all these cameras on me. I've got like 4 or 5 Nikons. I said, why me? And he said, because you're the only white guy in the car. You know, I take my cameras off, get up, knock on the door, and say, you know, how much are you asking? And they're kind of looking, you know, who's in the car? And I went, well, an interested party. And they told me, and I went back. But I mean, that's kind of the situation. I mean, my friend Flip Scholke, who was also a photojournalist and befriended Ali like 5 or 6 years before I did, told me he took Ali shopping once at a local department store, and they wouldn't let him try on any shirts. And I mean, Flip was just so incensed because it was just a whole racial thing.
Yeah.
You know? And of course, Ali wasn't very well known then, but even when he was known, I mean, he would run. I went out one morning at like, I don't know, 4 o'clock when he would do his run. And they, you know, obviously always follow him in a car for various reasons. But, you know, you had to sort of be careful. It's the South, you know. I grew up down there. But Ali he was just so much fun to be around. I mean, he was.
Was this around the time that he got the Time cover with the arrows? Or was that Rolling Stone? Rolling Stone, excuse me.
No, that was, I think that was New York Magazine.
Okay.
Or one of those. No, that came later in, I think that was in the 80s, that cover. All my black and white with, I mean, all my images with Ali and Arnold were all black and white. We shot most.
They're fantastic. And that one's called Titans, Muhammad Ali.
Well, yeah, I came up with
Schwarzenegger.
this idea for a book, and I thought, well, Ali and Arnold are probably the only two guys recognizable anywhere in the world. They're like real titans. And I thought this is a great concept. So I hired a writer to do bios, and I got a lot of quotes that I found, and I laid out the book, and I found a publisher, and we got it all together. And it's a really big, heavy coffee table book, which is out of print.
How
And
cool is that? What
the
was that process like when you were putting it together? Like you said, you hired a writer and you got with a publisher. You had extensive experience by that time in publishing and magazine layout and stuff. But what does a partnership like that entail?
well, I like to do my own layouts. I mean, I'm not a designer, but I took the pictures and I know what I have and I kind of know what goes with each other. And the whole thing I liked about Titans was I could have juxtaposed pictures of Ali and Arnold that sort of said something or meant something or made you question something that, they're on opposite pages. And I had a lot of fun putting it together. It took me a long time. And the publisher gave me a designer who I would upload my stuff to, and she was really good, but she didn't have much to do other than put numbers on the pages and make a few little suggestions because I knew what images I wanted, I knew where I wanted the quotes to be, blah 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 blah, and it just to me felt organic, and that's the only way I can work. Yeah, good or bad, it's the only way it is. And the publisher was I don't know. The publisher was an automotive publisher. They have an automotive website, and my book was on the automotive website. So nobody bought it because why would you go there to look for Arnold and Ali? And he didn't promote it. And I mean, it was all the worst experiences you can have with a publisher. I think I got quarterly checks from him, and I think I got enough to treat like my family at dinner at Biff Burger. So it wasn't what you call a moneymaker, but I was happy I did it. It was also a learning experience, and the printing was pretty good. Um,
Well,
but
it's it's a popular work for collectors now because you mentioned that it's out of print and I looked for a copy and yeah, they're going for quite a bit of money now.
really, I have 5 copies left. I'll be happy to sell.
Oh, man, I appreciate that, Al.
I just have I think I had like 10 books left, and I just literally wrapped them up to ship to my agent in London because they're going to sell them. I mean, I signed them all first, but
Oh, cool.
it's a good book. But the problem was the bodybuilders would look at it and they would go, what's with the boxer? And the boxer fans would look at it and go like, I don't care about the bodybuilder. Who is that? So it didn't work from that point of view, and it was never marketed correctly. I mean,
Right.
I would have been great if they'd marketed it as, I don't know, as an art book or whatever.
What did you learn from that experience moving on to your next work?
Well, I learned you have to fight hard with publishers I learned early on, like in the 70s, I learned to say no. And that was like the best thing I ever learned because like I would usually take any assignment that came in when I was doing editorial because obviously, it's kind of what you do. Well, I got this, I think it was the New York Times or New York or Time Magazine or one of those magazines in New York. They have a nasty habit of calling you at like 4 o'clock on a Friday for an assignment. So whatever this magazine was, they called me up and they said, we want you to shoot gardens in Beverly Hills. Well, that's not the top of my A list of things I want to do, but it pays. Oh, but we want you to find them.
Oh God.
They didn't know any. And so well, I live in LA. I must know all these people in Beverly Hills, right? So I said, well, let me get back to you. I'm on another call. And I hung up and I thought about it and I went, this is going to make for a really bad, and they wanted me to do it over the weekend. this is going to make for a really bad weekend. I'm going to be really, really unhappy. So I called him back and I said, I'd love to do this job, but I have another job that conflicts with it. It's going to eat up half of that day, and I don't want to like put you guys in a bind by only blah, 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 blah. And they, thank you very much. Would you like me to give you some other names? Oh, okay, click. And I went out the whole weekend and went, I am so happy. Happy because I wasn't making my $250 a day or whatever we were being paid at the time, but I wasn't like tearing my hair out doing something that I didn't really know what I was doing. And I learned the same thing in publishing. You know, they give you this like 47-page contract and da 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 da, and everybody does that nowadays. And what I do is read them, cross everything out for the most part, and rewrite them. And they can either, you know, we can either go back and forth and agree, or they can go, well, obviously you're not for us, and leave. And I don't care, because I just don't want to do stuff that I don't want to do anymore. I don't care how much money they're paying me, and they're not paying me that much to begin with. And in books, you know, like American publishers nowadays, first of all, they don't seem to be interested in, I don't know what, because I've got like about 300 refusals and digital refusals in my digital drawer of projects turned down. And then if they do, they want to do it their way. And it's like, no, it's not your project, it's mine. You know, and I'm willing to compromise. It's like with a racing book, they liked my layout ideas because I did it as a scrapbook. You know, I just thought it was different and funky. And also, I'm one man, and even covering a 12 or 24-hour race, it's impossible to be everywhere. And I missed a lot of really good drivers. I missed a lot of European drivers. Bob Bondurant, who I did a telephone interview with him, and you know, I've known him over the years. At Sebring in '66, I was in the pits. He was out on the course with his car. I'm out on the course shooting. He's in the pits. I never got a picture of him, ever. So it's like, how could you do that? Well, because I just couldn't do it. So the scrapbook thing worked because here's what I got. You know, this isn't like the definitive history of racing for 10 years. So
through your lens.
A what?
It's you know, it's like you said, it's not the definitive history of it, but it's through your lens.
Yeah, and it's just kind of my viewpoint. So that's one out, and I got to lay it out the way I liked, and I wrote captions, and it took me a long time because I was a lousy journalist, part of the photojournalist. I would take pictures, but I didn't take notes. And I think I didn't do that because I usually had a writer with me. And even in magazine assignments, you almost always had a writer. And it's like, I'm shooting, you're writing. And they would never come back together. So I had to, thank heavens for Google and the internet, I had to do a lot of research to find little facts that I kind of knew but didn't know and had lost sense of for the.
Yeah, how did you so you were coming off of your first book project, Titans, and then you went into the Racers, or did you do the Hunter book before that?
Well, I did the original Racers book, which was not as factual or not as thick and only 98 pages and was too expensive. And then Carroll Shelby died, and I had a lot of material on Carroll, so I put together a little book on Carroll, and you know, self-published again, and sold a few copies of that. And then I forget how I got onto the Hunter thing. Hunter and I were friends in the 70s.
As much as I really, really want to ask you about your relationship with Hunter, because I'm a huge fan of his as well, I would be doing our audience a disservice if I didn't ask you about Carroll Shelby. That's a name that we can't gloss over. Tell me about that project. Why did you have so many images of Carroll Shelby, and what was that about?
Well, because in the 60s, you know, when the Cobra came along, it was an exciting American car. It was very big at Sebring and Daytona, and I always made sure I was near their pits and around. And Shelby was easy to get along with, and in those days, you could get really close to your subjects. I mean, I would be like 3 or 4 feet from Carroll or any of his people or Dan Gurney or any of his drivers, because one, there weren't that many drivers there. Two, they knew what I looked like, because I would usually show up like 1 or 2 days before the race when they were just doing tests and qualifying. So I'd hang around. They'd get used to me. Shelby's people were great. One of his mechanics still has a place here in LA. He's been repairing and selling Rolls Royces for a long time. Really smart, but
were you so at that time you're a young guy, photojournalist. Were you like part of that? You said that you were friends with Thompson later on. So were you part of like that counterculture? Were you like a long hair out there on the racetrack while these guys were like kind of all business, in the pits, or what was that dynamic like?
Oh yeah, like when I left the governor in 1969, immediately grew my hair and threw away all my three-piece suits and never to be seen again. I mean, I had hair down to my shoulders for the most
Yeah.
part. I mean, I think they also sensed that I was always working. I wasn't there to hang around. I wasn't there to gawk. I wasn't looking for autographs. I was working, always working. And I think some people can sense that, that you're there for the picture. You're there to document whatever's going on. I wasn't friends with Carroll Shelby, but, he knew what I was doing. And I don't know, I might have told him at some point, hey, I'm shooting for Car and Driver, or I'm shooting for Time Magazine, or I'm shooting for Sports Illustrated or something. And again, depending on the magazines you work for is the level that you're at. Because at Sebring, I mean, I always had photo credentials for like the whole track, but there were certain places you still couldn't get. And then in the 80s, I went back on assignment for Sports Illustrated. And I said, I want to get up on that tower there on Pitt Straight. And they went, well, nobody gets up there. And I went, I'm from Sports Illustrated. I want to get up there. And he says, here's the keys, take them over. You have like immediate access. And of course, once I got to the top of the shaky tower, I went, maybe this wasn't a good idea. It didn't screw all the way, but that you had a certain amount of cachet depending on what you were doing or who you were doing it for. But again, being there early, there weren't that many photographers around on practice day. So when the horde showed up the next day, like keep them at bay, but hey, he's a familiar looking face, you could slide in under the ropes and shoot. And it just sort of all worked. And access in photography is everything. I mean, I've shot a few races over the last 10 years, and it's totally different from my point of view. The drivers are completely covered head to toe. You don't know who's behind the mask. They either hide away in the pits, and the pits, which used to be roped off so you could shoot in from the back, now they're usually enclosed either with plywood or, tarps, so you can't see anything. And then people go hide out in their trailer and they don't want to talk to you, and they don't want to be, because there's too many photographers. And even now as a photographer, the last race I went to, they wanted me to wear, I've worn a fire suit because at Indy you had to wear a fire suit in the pits, which is hot, and it's like 100 degrees and you're running back and forth. And now to be over the wall, you had to wear a crash helmet. And if you've ever tried to shoot pictures wearing a crash helmet, it's different. So
yeah, I can imagine.
I really don't need this anymore. And plus I'm too old to be doing racing anyhow. And there's no market for it.
Yeah, there's there's more outlets now, but it's almost as though like you can't catch the same type of striking imagery. I mean, when you talk about Carroll Shelby, everybody knows his iconic, his cowboy hat. He's a cowboy. Just the way that he looks. But like you mentioned, these drivers now are covered head to toe at all times. There's not really a discernible thing there. So it's kind of like you shoot one, you shoot them all.
Well, they also have sponsors, and they have to have a certain persona. They can't really be themselves like they could before. They would just be normal people, doing normal stuff. I mean, in like 63 or 64 at Daytona, Phil Hill, in between driving his Ferrari, is laying down on this folding metal beach chair wearing a cable net sweater, taking a nap, people walking around. And it's like, that's Phil Hill, you know, and it's just totally different. I mean, of course, the problem then in those days, a lot of drivers got seriously injured or killed because of there was no safety.
They're racing in open face helmets. It was nuts.
Oh yeah, and some didn't even wear seatbelts because they felt that, well, I'd rather be thrown out of the car than rolled over in the car. And I looked at some of my pictures looking down the pit straight at Sebring, and some of the early pictures, there's nothing separating the pits from the track. And the cars are doing like 90 to 120 miles an hour. Hay bales. There's some hay bales, like there's a hay bale every 6 or 10 feet. Gotten a lot safer. It's better for the sport, better for the drivers. They get to be alive after having an accident instead of being hauled off to the morgue.
But you got to photograph some really like interesting people at that time. I mean, from Dan Gurney to Ken Miles. I mean, those are two huge names, especially because the film Ford versus Ferrari came out, and for car people, they knew about those people before that movie, but now it's in the mainstream again. But who else were you photographing at that time? Names that you remember of racers
in the car world?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was, who else? Most of Gurney's people. I mean, most of Carroll Shelby's people, his mechanics, whatnot, whoever was around. Dan Gurney, I don't know. I'd have to look at my book. Now I forget all the names of people anymore.
Well, you were in Daytona and Sebring. When you're photographing a 24-hour race like that, what's your workload like? Obviously, you're not working for 24 hours, or are you? What was that like?
Well, in Daytona, I would usually work until about maybe 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and things would sort of slack off, and everybody be into sort of keeping the cars on the track moving. Nothing really earth-shaking going on. So I would go back to the hotel and grab some sleep, and usually I'd be up about 5 o'clock before it got light out, and eat some breakfast real quick, and I'd be back at the track because I always like being around at dawn and dusk because the light changes. And even though Daytona's in a big bowl, you don't really get any sunrises or sunsets, but you do get a change of light. So, of course, one year I missed the huge crash of the Ferrari and the Porsche with, what was his name? Oh, geez, that's the problem. Penske's driver. Penske had this 512 Ferrari entered, and it got hit by a 912 when he slowed down for a 917 that blew a tire and careened off the track. So they came in and serviced it, and I mean, it was a severe damage. So when I got back to the track next morning, and I see this beautiful 512 Ferrari, because Penske always painted his cars and it always looked immaculate. It's just covered in gaffer tape or masking tape or racer tape, as they called it. I mean, it was being held together by tape, and it's pretty different. And I think they went on to place second or third.
Those David Hobbs, maybe.
Yeah, Hobbs is running it. Yeah, there's another. I never photographed David Hobbs, and he did the postword in my book. He's such a nice guy. Again, for whatever reason, I never photographed him. I mean, I really sometimes anguish over who I missed, not who I got.
Who did you, out of all the magazines, who did you work with most? You mentioned Sports Illustrated a moment ago, but and that those credentials carried some weight. What was the weightiest magazine that you worked for, and who did you work with most?
Well, most of my work was with Time and Newsweek. I did covers for both of them, but we were always doing assignments, whether it was political or racing or feature or whatever. They had a lot of subjects, a lot of areas to cover. And I've always been sort of a generalist, which is difficult to sell because I shoot, especially in advertising, because I shoot cars and I shoot people. I also shoot in the studio. And, we had to repackage our portfolios so that, when somebody wanted to see cars, we only sent them cars. But with magazines, it was great to be a journalist because you could cover pretty much anything. Time and Newsweek I shot constantly for. Sports Illustrated later actually it's hard to get into these magazines. I knocked on Sports Illustrated's door for like several years until they gave me this little small assignment, which, I killed myself to make sure it was like better than good. And then after that, they slowly start to ramp up till all of a sudden you're getting more and more work.
Were they just giving you photo rates at the time, or did they assign you a story?
Oh, no, it was always a story. I mean, I would usually not shoot what they call the big four, like football and baseball and basketball, because their staff guys wanted to do those. But I didn't really care. I liked the weird stuff. So they would send me up to, I think, Washington State once to shoot a chariot race.
Oh my God.
And it's like, yeah, this is cool. It's different. Or
It's still racing, man. That's cool. So did you spend a lot of time at racetracks here in California since you were working out of LA? Did you go to, a lot of racing around here?
Not a lot. I shot out of Riverside 2 or 3 times. I shot in Ontario. And of course, neither one of those tracks exist anymore. I think about it. The only two, well, up at the 2 tracks north of here, I've shot up at those. I don't remember the names of them, but they're still in existence. And the track up in Big Sur.
I gotta ask you, Al, what was it like to get your first cover of Time? Like, was that just kind of a surreal experience? Or was it a little bit different then? Tell me about that.
Well, the first big cover I got was Newsweek. It was a Green Beret cover. And I think it was in '69, but it was kind of an all-day assignment because I had to fly from Florida to Fort Bragg, rent a car, drive to Fort Bragg, shoot this. I had like two hours to shoot these Green Berets, which they were doing a story on, and it was starting to rain. And then I had to race back to the airport and then fly to New York and then drop the film at the lab and have them run a strip test, which is they process the first 3 or 4 frames to make sure that you're happy with the processing. And I'd come back and okay it and then check in a motel and crash. And the next morning call the cover editor and said, "You get the film okay?" And he said, "Yeah." "Is this all you shot?" And it's like 3 rolls. I went, "Yeah." "Are you happy?" And he went, "Oh yeah, it's great." But they were used to going through hundreds or dozens or a lot of rolls of film. And I've never been a big film shooter. I learned from the newspaper days. So sometimes we would go out on assignment, you'd shoot 3 or 4 frames, you'd come back to the newspaper in the darkroom, you'd open up the camera, clip the film off, process that little clip of film, and reload the film on your camera and go out on your next assignment. So I kind of learned how to economize. And it's like, when you know you got it, or you think you got it, you stop shooting. But after that, on my next Newsweek cover assignment, I shot 18 rolls of film on the motor drive, just making sure I had a lot of film to make the guy happy, because that's what he does. But anyway, I got covered.
You said the first big cover was that Green Beret cover. What was that? What were you shooting photos of Green Beret for? You said that was in '69, so I can imagine it was a pretty tumultuous time in our nation, and to shoot a Green Beret for the cover of Newsweek had to be kind of, and there's got to be a story there.
Well, they were doing a big story on the Green Berets, which a lot of people didn't know about, and President Kennedy had started the Green Berets. But, when you're a photographer, you don't get involved in all this politics. It's like, here's what we need, go shoot it, and try to shoot it the best way you can. Well, a writer had already gotten there and had talked to whoever was in charge. So all I had to do was show up. And it's kind of like, you're making this up on the fly as you go. So it's like, okay, follow them out. So I had a platoon of guys, like about 16 or 20 guys. And I try to find a face I can focus on. And I see this guy like 2 rows back, and he's just got that face like he would kill me and not even flinch. That's the face I want. So I'm like shooting with like an 85 millimeter lens, wide open. It's kind of overcast. I'm shooting Ektachrome X, which is sort of fine grain because it's a cover. And I try to talk to the people I'm photographing to get something out of them or calm them down or whatever, but I don't always know what I'm saying because a lot of times I just babble sort of incoherently because I'm trying to think, f-stop, shutter speed, I'm bracketing. I'm always bracketing and changing your angle a little bit. And I just remember talking to these guys and saying something about, gee, it's raining. I'll bet you're afraid of getting wet. It's like these guys crawl around in the swamp and eat snakes. I don't think a little rain's going to bother them. But, that's like the whole motivation. And then to make it weird, the cover came out 2 weeks later, and 2 weeks later, I'm in the Army Reserve.
Oh, wow.
So I'm at summer camp that 2 weeks, and I get a telegram from Ken Regan at Camera 5 saying, congratulations on your first cover.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like, cover? So I go to the local PX, and on the newsstand is Newsweek with my cover on it. It's like, wow.
That's awesome, man. That had to be such an interesting feeling. When you talk about magazines that are famous for their photography, high production imagery, that's right there. And then the other is Time, of which you also have a cover. Tell us about that one.
I had several covers on Time. I kind of forget what the hell they were. I did one on sailboats and I don't know, a couple other things. But I remember I was doing, I did a cover for Newsweek on Chris Everett. She was very hot as a tennis player back in the 70s. And she lived in Lauderdale, which was like half hour down the road from me. And she practiced at home. They had their own court, and her dad was her coach. So I went down there and photographed her and kind of made friends to scope it out. And then I went back down there with blue seamless paper and kind of wallpapered around their tennis court. And I brought, because she's in the sun all the time and she's like 20 something at the time, her skin was terrible from being out in the sun and in Florida. So I took a makeup person down with me, made her up and looked nice, which made her very happy. And I shot a cover for Newsweek magazine. Well, I don't know if that had come out or was due to come out. Time magazine calls up and says, we want you to shoot a cover at Chrissy. So I go back down to Florida and shoot her again, different. And that cover got pushed a couple of times because something happened that was more newsworthy and they would use it instead, and finally got killed. So I got a Newsweek cover on Chris Everett, but I never got the Time cover on Chris Everett. So you get paid to shoot it, but I didn't get the space rate because I think at that time they were paying like $1,500 for a cover, which was, a fair amount of money. But it's just the excitement of doing it.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's incredible. And I pulled up this image, and we'll throw it up, whenever this airs, of that Newsweek cover that you shot with the Green Beret on the cover. Holy cow, man. That is such a powerful image. Really fantastic. And I know that you mentioned that you don't really, involve your personal politics, which is a policy that I kind of subscribe to as well in my journalism. But you were good friends with Hunter Thompson, who was very political. Tell us about that relationship and tell us about the Cozumel Diary, your other book.
Well, Hunter and I, we met up at the Republican Convention in Miami, I think in '72. And I was covering it for Time or Newsweek or a variety of magazines, I don't know who, but I was on the floor. Nixon was giving his acceptance speech. I was underneath of him looking out at the audience. And I've got this 400 millimeter lens and I'm kind of looking for faces, expressions. And there's this weird character kind of saunters over towards me. And if you've ever seen Hunter, he's a weird looking dude. He's tall, he dresses different, although I think he was dressed appropriately for that. And he's got like a drink in his hand, which is totally illegal. You're not supposed to have drink, Cokes, martinis, or whatever out on the floor. So we struck up a conversation. And then I ran into him later at the hotel bar. And, we chit-chatted for a bit. And I guess that was it for a while. I'm not sure. There may have been something else going on. Oh, I know what. We both had the same idea from different points of view. I had shot a lot of advertising for this boat company called Stryker Yachts. They made these beautiful aluminum hulled boats. Every year they'd have a big sailfish tournament down in Cozumel, a little island off Yucatan. And these rich guys would have their captains motor their boats in there and they'd fly down and join them. So I'm thinking Hemingway, and Hunter's thinking the same thing. Hemingway, drinking, tough guys, all the books, it's going to be great. So I talked my aluminum boat ad guy into flying me down there. I said, we'll get great pictures. I'll get some magazine stuff. We'll get exposure for you. So I get down there and I run into Hunter out on the dock. And it's like, what are you doing here? So thereafter, for like the next year, he called me the aluminum boat photographer, because Hunter has a way of picking up nicknames.
Yeah, definitely.
It turned out that these fishermen would go out, they'd leave sort of early in the morning, because I went out on a couple of them. Hunter never did. He stayed in the bar. And they would fish, and then they'd come back like 4:30 and then have dinner and they go to bed. So Hunter and I had to close all the bars on the island because none of the fishermen were around drinking. We were drinking. So we would go from one bar to the next, and Hunter had this thing, this Volkswagen convertible, looked like a German Panzerwagen. And every bar after we got ready to leave, we'd order two beers and he would, you never want to drive with Hunter, but I guess I was so drunk I didn't care. And we would drive at our, your life at stake to the next bar and do it all over again. And then Hunter'd go to bed and he wouldn't get up till 11:30 the next morning, and I'd be up at the crack of dawn because I can't pass up the sunrise. But so we struck up a friendship. So he gets the Playboy interview in 1974, and he's up in Aspen freezing his ass off in snow, and it's like he decides he wants to go do it in Cozumel. And he brings down his wife and Juan, his son. So I guess he said, well, get that Satterwite guy to take the pictures, because for whatever reason. So they give me the assignment. So I fly in, I know exactly where to find Hunter, which bar, straight from the airport, and then go check in the hotel. And the writer was down there. So Hunter'd get up about 11, and we usually do an interview out by the pool or on the seawall or somewhere on the grounds of the El Presidente Hotel. And then about 1 or 2 o'clock, we'd wrap that up, go downtown to downtown Cozumel, which was a tiny little area, and sit at Pepe's and drink all day and eat. And Hunter picked up some locals. So we had me and the writer and Hunter and usually 3 or 4 local guys who were really nice. One guy was a diver who dove for black coral and people like that. And we'd sit around and do acid and beer and whatnot, and then go eat dinner. And then Hunter and I would close the bars because the writer would go to the hotel room to go over his notes and then do it all over the next day. So I lasted I think it was a 4-day assignment. So I said to Hunter, I got to go. It's 4-day assignments. No, don't leave. Don't leave. I'll tell him I was in a lot of trouble. So I stayed around a couple more days. And then finally left. And then I got this really nice letter. It's in the opening part of the book from Hunter, basically calling me a pig fucker or something like that.
Yeah, it says, I'm looking at it right now. It says, Al, you deviant pig. I just saw the interview with your photos, photos spelled with an F. If you ever need a personal recommendation, just give me a ring. Hunter.
Well, that's Hunter, he loves doing that shit. But it wasn't until years later that I finally started looking at the negatives. Here's the funny thing: I lived in Florida. Hunter would come to Florida to report on Nixon, and Nixon had a house down in Miami, Key
So
Biscayne.
was this the time that he was working on the campaign trail 72?
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
cool.
72 up to 74, and even a little bit later. So Hunter would call me up, and either I would go down and meet him, or once he came up with his wife, and we all went out to dinner in Palm Beach until they threw us out. Well, we closed the place. We didn't do anything bad, but we were sitting there drinking and talking until, like, an hour past closing time, and they finally said, we got to go. But and then we're driving down A1A in Palm Beach at like 1 o'clock in the morning with open containers of alcohol in a convertible doing like 50 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. And I'm telling Hunter, slow down, man, you're going to get busted. I mean, living there, I know the cops, they're straight to jail. And just before we got to the bridge, we get stopped. And I figured, that's it, man, we're going to jail. It's like over. And Hunter talks his way out of it. I could not believe it. I don't know how he did it. It's kind of like a Jedi, nothing to see here. But
Yeah, exactly. I've read most of his work and also like other people's work about him, and that's a recurring theme that he just had this type of charisma where he could do whatever he wanted, and people for whatever reason let him. So it's interesting to hear you say that, like a firsthand account. This was before Hunter was well, so he was already pretty famous from Hell's Angels and then his work with Rolling Stone, right? So by this time, he was already a pretty respected journalist. But you have so many great images of him. Did you know at the time, like that, he was going to be a figure our in our culture, or were you just snapping photos of your friend?
well, it wasn't really my friend that I was snapping photos of. It was an assignment because when I went down, I would go down to Key Biscayne. I would never carry a camera. I never shot any pictures of Hunter other than in Cozumel, because why would I take pictures of my friend?
Right.
Which I should have. So there are no pictures in the book other than Cozumel. But I'll tell you one quick interesting story. I went down to Key Biscayne one day, and Hunter's sitting out by the pool on a table covered with all the empty glasses of grapefruit juice and vodka he's been drinking. And so we get up to go, and he says, we go to his room. He says, I got this red telephone. My phone wouldn't work. So I'm going down the hall to complain to the front desk, and the room 2 doors down, the door's open. So I go in, and there's this red phone, and it says, it's got a White House emblem on it. And, right away, I know it's a Secret Service because they stay there because Nixon got a house there. So what does he do? He takes a phone and rips the cord out of the wall, puts it in the trunk of his car. You didn't. And so we go out to his car, and he opens the trunk, and he hands me the phone. He said, I want that little thing in the middle that says White House. And I couldn't get it out. And I went, Pop, here you go. He says, want the phone? I went, oh no, you keep it. And it's like, oh God, it's just, what else can he do to get in trouble? He was always like that. He knocked on my door once in a motel when I was staying in a different motel in Cozumel on another assignment. And he said, we got to go somewhere. Avis is after me. And I went, why? Well, he rented a thing, and he managed within a week, he lost all 4 doors and the top.
Oh my God.
It all came off. And I'm surprised he still had the windshield, except it was attached. And I don't know how he does this stuff, or probably Rolling Stone was picking up the bill, but that's Hunter. He's just a very strong. I mean, I had to pull him out of more stores in Miami Beach. Like once he wanted a harpoon gun because he was going to back to Cozumel and kill somebody. And I went, one, they're not going to sell it to you because it's a display item, and two, you're not going to steal it because you get arrested.
By that time, were you familiar with like his reputation for being kind of a wild guy, or was this all new to you when you met him? Like you weren't expecting it?
No, it was just Hunter.
Yeah.
That's just the way he was. He
Yeah.
had his the Hells Angels book was out, but not that many people knew about it. But his campaign trail book was out, and so a lot of people knew who he was, but they didn't know what he looked like. So he could talk to people the way he does, and they didn't recognize him because he's a very strange guy to talk to.
Yeah, that way that he kind of like mumbles and talks kind of
Yeah,
fast. Yeah, he's like an interesting.
very strange way of talking, and but he's interesting to talk to. So he could talk to anybody, and he knew a lot of stuff, especially sports. But after the other book came out, and people started knowing who he was, it got really hard for him to work because now he's a celebrity. It's like being Tom Hanks, and you also work for the New York Times. Who do you think is going to give you a real interview? It's
Right.
like autograph.
Did you ever make it out to his ranch in Colorado?
No, I never did because I just had no interest in going there.
Right. Yeah.
Now I did, but at the time it was like it's kind of off the beaten path from where I'm going. If I had an assignment nearby, I'd have gone by, but didn't
That's
happen.
pretty wild. So is the Cosmo Diary still in print? Is that something that people can still buy?
No, it's I self-published it again. I got Kickstarter to fund it. I did a Kickstarter thing. So I hired a designer and kind of told him what I wanted, and he added a few other touches, like a couple of fold-out pages, and he did some really nice logo. Like even the shipping box is pretty cool, and people I would imagine probably save it, although I tape it up when I ship it. But I had pre-sold like 500. I did a limited edition run of like 1,000 books. And there were 800 numbered and signed copies, and 600 of those were slipcases, which I forget what they retail for, $150 or something. And then there were 200 clamshells, which came with 2 8x10 photographs of Hunter that I signed, and those retailed for $500.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, I didn't sell that many because they're kind of pricey, but I just wrapped those up to ship to my agent in London because I only have like about 100, 110 left. And I'm moving to New York and I got no room for them. So they're taking them. I have here, I probably still have maybe a dozen copies.
Man, that's awesome.
I'd keep just because somebody's going to want to buy one between now and Christmas.
Definitely. That's awesome, man. So coming full circle, I'm sorry, we talked about Titans, the Racers, and now Hunter Thompson. But the Racers is still available right now. You're working with a new publisher, and it's re-released on. You can get it on Amazon. Can they get it on your website, Al?
No, because I don't really sell anything off my website. I'm not set up for that. They can get it from, I think, ACC distributor. The distributor's in New York. I can give you the address later.
We'll make sure to link it in the comment section for everybody who's watching and wants to pick up a copy of The Racers. It's fantastic. It's got amazing imagery in it, really cool storytelling as well. You won't, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on the website that we're going to link in the comment section below. Al, as we kind of wrap things up here, do you have any closing thoughts or projects that you're currently working on? I know that you recently, you worked with the Motoring Club in Los Angeles. You did that 12 Hours of Sebring Steve McQueen exhibit, right? Do you have anything on the horizon? I know you're in the middle of a big move, but if you want to take a moment to plug anything.
Well, the Steve McQueen show is coming up in November.
Oh, really? I thought the website was a little bit confusing then. Sorry.
It didn't happen because of the virus, obviously. So they're having some sort of a limited thing in and it's a benefit for the boys club that Steve sponsors. So I think all the money or most of the money goes to that. And that is like, I think it's the second week in November. I can give you the date on that too.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. And we'll link that in the comment section as well. So that's put on by the Motoring Club Los Angeles. You guys partnered together to create an exhibit. What you have photos of Steve McQueen and during his time racing?
Yeah, I shot Steve at Sebring in 1970. It was a Perry Match assignment because he was running his 908 Porsche, getting ready for the Le Mans movie they were just going to shoot the next year. And they almost won the race. They lost the race by something like 17 seconds. It's like a 12-hour race. And Andretti just drove like a madman in the Ferrari in the last hour of the race to slowly unlap them and catch them. I mean, it was just amazing.
Well, yeah, I imagine that he didn't want some Hollywood movie star beating him in a race.
Well, no, I mean, he was respected as a good driver, as was Paul Newman. They were both good drivers, and they didn't really seek hey, I'm a celebrity. They were like, I'm a racer, leave me alone.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, but I forget what Paul Newman invented, but I know that Steve McQueen invented the trans brake for drag racers, which is totally interesting. And then, of course, he raced Baja a bunch of times, the Elsinore Grand Prix. I mean, the guy, he was a real racer, so I don't think anybody was questioning that. But still, you had to, imagine that Andretti was like, I can't let these guys win.
Well, Andretti didn't want anybody to beat him. I mean, That was it was like go like hell. He was all about winning. I mean, he drove a variety of cars, and boy, he could drive unbelievable. Amazing guy.
So, so you have some fantastic images of Steve and Sebring at the time, and that's going on. You said, I think the second week of November. Again, we'll link in the description. Al, I know that you're in the middle of a move, and we don't want to take up too much more of your time. We're really grateful that you made some time to do this. Before we kind of sign off, is there anything that you'd like to say, or anybody you'd like to shout out before we let you go?
Well, I appreciate being here. I'm always happy to talk about my work, and I have like another 5 books I'm working on. The problem for photographers and me is finding publishers. So we constantly look. I'm working on a Southerners book I've been working on for 10 years, and then another one which is fisheye images of various cities like Paris, London, New York, LA. I shot Tokyo last year, Venice. And it's like people have been to these cities and they've shot all the great places, but I shoot them with a 180-degree fisheye lens, which is around. You end up with a round image. So it's not as easy to shoot as one would think, but I think the images are pretty interesting. I just haven't found a publisher for them yet. So, I keep busy working. I still shoot a little bit. I don't do any assignments. I only work on my own projects, but it's kind of what I mean. I love photography, so I can't give it up. It's all I do.
Well, we are grateful for your work, and anybody who's interested in checking it out, head over to alsatterwite.com. Al, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it again. And for anybody who wants to know more information, again, alsatterwite.com.
You're welcome. Take care.
So there you have it, Greg. Man, what a treat it was to interview such a prolific artist like Al Satterwite, man. I mean, his body of work spans decades, from working in the ad industry, working as a photojournalist, and as an artist. I have the utmost respect for him. I thought it was really cool that we got to pick his brain about firsthand accounts with the likes of the heavyweight champion of the world, Arnold Schwarzenegger, before he became the movie star and governor. And of course, to hear some of the exploits of the great Hunter Thompson, right, who the pioneer of gonzo journalism. So it was cool for me to just be able to geek out on that. And I think our audience is going to dig it too.
Well, yeah. And what's really cool is there's some of our audience who I don't think will genuinely appreciate being where he was and some of the accomplishments. And I mean, we live in a world, I mean, perfect example, cigarette ads. We're going to have people watching this that are like, why would you take pictures for cigarettes?
Yeah, man. They,
Like,
you know, they don't know who Joe Camel is or the Marlboro Man.
yeah, like that was a different time. And I mean, that's iconic.
It's huge.
And
I mean, they used to have
a TVMA for having smoking in it.
Yeah, exactly, man. There used to be huge advertisements in Times Square of the Marlboro Man, like the cowboy sitting there smoking a cigarette. It was huge in motorsports. I mean, how many sponsors?
The Winston Cup?
Yeah, huge.
Like Winston drag racing?
Camel livery everywhere, Marlboro livery everywhere. I mean, Salem, it was as big as it gets. The tobacco companies were spending exorbitant amounts of money. So it's kind of cool to hear stories from back in the day, especially when he talks about just the time frame, right? Like when he got his first Newsweek cover, when he got his first Time cover, like that's huge, man. And we're talking about a little bit about it. I don't know if it was before, but when we talked about that Newsweek cover, right? I looked up the photo of the Green Beret that he was talking about, right? That program that JFK had launched. The elite of our armed forces, and when he describes the photo, it's like, oh yeah, he took a photo of a Green Beret. But then when you look at it, dude, I mean, Al just has this eye, man, because when I saw it, it just struck me. I didn't even look at his rank or anything. The guy looks like he's carved from stone. He's just got that 1,000-yard stare. He's like, this century, or like, you know what I mean? It's just a very powerful image. And Al has that eye, and he carries it over into capturing popular culture at that time, from the 70s until now.
Yeah,
very cool.
I mean, the fact that if you look at his rank, he's the first sergeant. Obviously, he got a grizzled. He got that guy. Whether he picked that guy because I don't know, but it all matches up. I mean, that's whether you looked at his collar or his face, they both say the same thing, right?
And I thought it was cool. He could capture something as poignant as that, and then turn around and be a part of this counterculture at the time, right? So like he towed that line between working for an established industry and then also being a part of like this burgeoning counterculture movement in the United States. He talked about how he had long hair and stuff, but he was also in the pits, taking photos of Carroll Shelby. So it was kind of, culture clash, but not really. So I thought that was really cool.
I wonder if that kind of goes to history, kind of turning everything into black and white and erasing the gray.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's 50 years removed at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if time just kind of makes everything, one way or the other. There is no gray until you tell stories like this. And then you start to see there was a lot of gray.
It's an interesting point. It's an interesting concept. I'm not sure. I guess, yeah, maybe you're right. Because, speaking with Al, it was cool, hearing him talk about photographing the heavyweight champ and just, some of the struggles that he dealt with, like that story that he told us about Muhammad Ali trying to buy a house but then segueing into, partying with Hunter Thompson, just different worlds. But he got to take advantage of a lot of it. He was working for Time, Newsweek, Sports Illustrated. I mean, this guy was everywhere. And I thought it was really cool to hear those stories, man.
Yeah, especially the off-the-air ones, which you guys don't get to hear.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's some that we can't share just because this is a somewhat PG show, right? So
I don't know. We might get that MA rating because we talked about smoking.
Yeah, well, smoking's bad. That everybody knows that. So, and if you don't, then you should, because it's bad. But yeah, so thank you. A huge thank you to Al and his team. It was a real pleasure to work with them, and hopefully we'll get a copy of The Racers, and you guys should all go out and get a copy of The Racers. Check it out. I believe it's on Amazon. If you like racing, if you like history, if you like the history of motorsports, if you like figures like Steve McQueen and Carroll Shelby, definitely pick it up. It's really cool. Greg, speaking of people like Steve McQueen and speaking of books and things like that, I actually want to take a moment and give a quick shout out. Let me grab it here. I got 2 books sent over to me from the people at CarTech.
And just as an FYI, this is where you guys put in the comments, Vinny, you can read?
It takes me a little bit longer sometimes than others, but I do all right. So
There's a lot of pictures.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of pictures. So I got 2 books sent over from CarTech, and I'll do this one first. This one's called "How to Swap GM LT Engines into Almost Anything." Right. So, Greg, you know this as well as anybody in the automotive aftermarket. LS swaps are like the thing, right? And they have been for, over a decade now. People have just been doing it like crazy.
Put it
swapping
into
them
anything. LS swap the world, right?
Anything and everything. Planes, trains, and automobiles. And now, the LS, how long did the LS run for? It was from 1997 till now.
13 or 14. I think.
Well, the family, the LS family of engines still lives on in like GM trucks, right?
Well, no, they've gone to like L83s and stuff.
That's true. Derivatives, anyways. Yeah. Which you could argue that the LT is, but anyways, that well is drying up. You can still find them in millions of cars and junkyards across America, but as is the way of the world, people are looking for the next latest and greatest thing, and that's the GM LT engine. Out of a bunch of trucks and cars, like the Camaro, different design but similar at the same time. Creates more horsepower, torque, things like that. Really
injection.
Cool. Yeah, direct injection. That's the main. Yep. So totally cool. I would love to do an LT swap. I've toyed with the idea of putting one in my Firebird, which has an LS, just to show, the similarities. And I think it'd be kind of cool. But anyways,
that'd be a very cool swap. But
yeah. So thank you, CarTech, for sending this over. And the other book, let's take a look at that one because it's really cool. It is Bullitt by Matt Stone, the cars and people behind Steve McQueen. So, as you guys know, I'm a huge Steve McQueen fan, as like most auto enthusiasts are. But this is really cool. It's got the foreword by Chad McQueen, Steve McQueen's son. Let's just take a look at some of the points here. Steve McQueen is an icon and very popular book subject, blah, blah, blah. Let's read their little blurb. Ask any automotive enthusiast what his or her favorite chase scene to appear in a movie is, and the majority will respond with Bullitt. It has made the top 5 in every list covering the best automotive chase scenes in history, but the appeal isn't just about the chase scene. Shot entirely on location in picturesque San Francisco in 1968, the movie not only features the historic chase scene, but also many outdoor scenes filled with cars and architecture of the period that are filmed in crisp, clear color. The movie was the 5th highest grossing film in 1968. It was well received by critics, and the chase scene won Frank P. Keller an Oscar for editing. In Bullitt, the cars and people behind Steve McQueen, you'll get the complete behind-the-scenes picture of how all the action was coordinated and filmed. Included in the ideas behind the making of the movie, an interview with director Peter Yates, production stills, and the planning for the scene. Also covered is the cast, the building of the cars used in the film, and how and why the stunts were choreographed and filmed. To round out the story, an examination of what happened to the cars is included, as well as coverage of the multiple Bullitt edition cars released by Ford after the film, including the latest 2019 edition. While several books have been published about Steve McQueen, the King of Cool, never before has there been a thorough examination of this specific film and these specific cars. This edition is a welcome addition to the library of any McQueen, Mustang, or automotive film history fan. So, thank you, CarTech, for sending this over. I'm a huge Bullitt fan. I'm a huge Steve McQueen fan. So I'm going to kind of take a look at this, and maybe I'll give you guys a review here pretty soon. But go check it out. It's from CarTech by Matt Stone.
For sure. That sounds like a good book.
Yeah, man.
Especially the history, behind or where the cars went and where they ended up.
Well, I mean, there was like some lore behind all that. And just in recent years, they discovered one and it went to auction, sold for like an insane amount of money. We actually published an article about it. You guys can find it on streetmusclemag.com. Yeah, man, I think that's pretty cool. So if anybody else wants to send us some books, shoot them over. We'll take a look.
Vinny will do his best to not talk.
Yeah.
Why am I picking on you, dude? Like, you're an editor of 2 magazines. Like, what? I don't even know where this is coming from.
It's okay. I don't mind. It's got pretty pictures, and I can sound out the words. No, but yeah, man, I think that's really cool. So we got a lot of reading to do, man. We got to catch up on Al's books. We got to catch up on these books. But outside of that, man, what's going on Engine Labs? I know you're in the throes of a project. What's sitting behind you? It looks like you got something torn down, man. What's up?
Yeah, it's our LS. I'm pulling it apart. Probably going to do some measuring and just some comparison. I think the first article we're going to do on it is actually like a CSI, because it's a used engine. I will tell you already, there's been some machine work done outside of the factory on this block.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's been fun. It's CSI. I know most people, with an LS, the more you look, the more you can find wrong. So if you just don't look at anything, it'll make 1,400 horsepower and be fine, right?
Yeah.
But it's a cool, inside look, and I like digging into things and measuring things, and get to play with some of my more precision measuring tools that don't get used all that often.
Yeah, man. You sent me some cool photos of you like measuring the CCs on those cylinder heads. It was pretty cool.
Well, this is hilarious. I didn't have any food coloring to do to color the water in the burette, so I made some Crystal Light. Right? It's colored, right? No big deal. Right before the show, I just looked in the fridge. My girlfriend had reclaimed it and put it in the fridge. So I had to pour it out. I mean, because that's so. Yeah, you
don't want to be drinking what was in there.
But I think it's hilarious because I was just using it as a container in the shop, right?
Were you able to date that engine?
Pretty sure. I mean, we know it's between 07 and 09.
Okay.
I haven't been able to tell exactly what year or anything. But it does have replacement pistons in it.
Okay.
And so far, I mean, it's kind of on the dirty side, like just a little bit of like wear. I hate saying that because it's a used engine, no shit.
Well, there's a reason that it was turned into a Reviva as a core, right?
I'm assuming so. I mean, I really don't know the path of how they get their stuff. I mean, I don't know if it's just junkyard stuff. I don't know if it's accident cars. I really don't know how that whole the whole logistic system works.
So a lot of fleet vehicles, they'll get them from.
Yeah.
So, retired school buses and, delivery of vans and trucks and, things like that.
Yeah. I'm really interested to see the bearings on this. I mean, the thing turns over super smoothly. There's no real issues. I haven't found anything that scares me. Just interesting things like the fact that the bore measures 6 thousandths over what it should be ideally, and there's replacement pistons, so that tells me somebody bored out the block a little bit, cleaned it up and threw new pistons in.
Probably like a dingle ball or something.
No, because there's a significant, 5 thousandths, you're not going to get that with a dingle ball. I mean, maybe you would if you spent, 3 or 4 days per cylinder. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe that'd be a fun test. Let's see how much we can actually remove with one of those, right?
No, that's a test of it. Let's see how much time we can waste.
well, we can do it over the New Year's break where we're out of the office. Maybe I can kill a few days doing that.
Hey, what are we going to do for Christmas break? Are we going to do a Christmas episode? Are we going to do a New Year's episode?
Why not?
What do you guys think? Should we do a holiday episode? Halloween is in 2 days at the time of this recording. So, ooh. This was your Halloween episode, you guys. Greg dressed up as a killer Mustang driver. And
I'll have you know, I've never killed a single person.
okay, well, that's a relief. But he's only had his new Mustang for a little while, so give him time.
It's got traction control.
But anyways, check out streetmusclemag.com, check out enginelabs.com, check out powerautomedia.com. If you guys are interested in knowing more about our guests, check out alsatterwite.com. Drop us a like, a comment, a subscribe, and hit that notification button, because every time we go live, which is every Friday at noon, you'll get a little ding that reminds you to come watch. So let us know who we should have as our next guest, and we'll see you guys next time. I've been Vinny. That's been Greg. This was the RodCAST. Peace out.